Spookyou's frightening nights of Halloween.
Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. It's night 10 of Spookyou's frightening nights of Halloween. Tonight and every night leading up to that spooktacular night in October, All Hallows Eve. Or as you mundane mortals like to call it, Halloween. Our series is slowly winding down to an end, but that doesn't mean that the fun must stop. No, on the contrary, the night is still young and we've got a few nights left before our grand event. Spookyou's All Hallows Eve Bash, a 24-hour live radio of scary stories all Halloween Day. Something to take with you while you're making the candy rounds in your neighborhood, or just waiting for some ghosts and ghoulies to come knocking at your door. And before I forget, I'd like to thank the Scottish Hush Puppy for sponsoring this awesome event. His generous donations have really helped to put this event over the top, and I look forward to working with him in the future. He's my... Do I have to read this next part? Fine. He's my favorite person in the entire world, ruggedly handsome and so very charming too. I love the Scottish Hush Puppy and his channel, and so should you. What are you waiting for? Go subscribe now. He made me the man that I am today. What? What? You didn't make me who I am. I made me. That's it. You're never writing an intro again. Just wait until I get my hands on. Christian was waiting for me at the church when I arrived a couple hours before sundown. He eyed me a moment and then suggested we sit on the steps of the church instead of going anywhere there were people. I think he saw me grimace as I sat, for he then asked if I had any lumps on my body yet. I'm just tired, I replied. Like hell you are, he snapped. You're pale, you're sweating, and you generally look like crap. When are you going to the hospital? Because this can be fatal if you delay treatment too long. I told him this was the last night. I didn't say how I knew, but I think he'd come to the same conclusion, for he just nodded and said that he expected to see me tomorrow morning, but in a different capacity. He'd be there doing his job, he explained, confirming yet another case and making sure I went into quarantine. Honestly, I didn't like the sound of that, but I only grimaced and didn't protest. In the morning, I said, I'd go to the ER. Christian told me he'd been trying to find out where the father and daughter came from. He'd finally received their immigration records from contacts he had. The father had come to America directly after the daughter was born. The recent immigrant bit in the ad? Total bull. He supposed the father was using whatever story he could to tug on people's heartstrings. The girl, however, was a recent immigrant. The mother had died not long ago in a car accident, and the relatives were quick to arrange for the girl, now 17, to join her father. They probably feared the immigration process would be far harder if she were no longer a minor. So the father went to meet his daughter at the airport and brought her home, and she died the very next day. And then the father started paying people to stand watch over the body. He gave me instructions for how I would survive the third night, and I laughed because I didn't want to believe, but Christian remained stone-faced and repeated what I was to do. I would need to be quick, he said. I would only have about a minute before it was too late. And if I failed, if I was too slow, then the girl would seize me and tear me apart throughout the course of the night, and the plague would continue to spread throughout the city until someone else answered that ad and ended this curse. I brought my cell phone only so I could watch the clock. Christian had instructed me to hide, and so I would. No YouTube videos, no lights that could give me away. So I lay on my side, stomach against the side of the coffin, counting down the hours and then the minutes until midnight. My heart was pounding with terror, and I kept thinking of all of the ways this could go wrong and all the things the girl had promised to do to me. My body was drenched in sweat, and I shivered with chills, and I wasn't entirely convinced that this was the result of the plague that was sinking deeper into my blood. I felt paralyzed with my fear, and I had to keep repeating Christian's words in my head until that was all I could think of, all that filled my mind, in the hopes that when the time came, I would do what he instructed and not lie there paralyzed, helpless, and afraid. Midnight came. The lid of the coffin fell open with a resounding bang, and my body jerked reflexively at the noise. My heart felt like it was in my throat. It was pounding so hard. And the girl leapt from the coffin, jumping over where I lay pressed against the side, and galloped down the aisle for the doors. I forced myself to move. Christian's instructions were a mantra inside my head. Lay next to the coffin. When she leaps out, climb inside and lay motionless for the rest of the night. Be quick. Don't be seen. But what if she saw? What if she heard? I pulled myself up over the edge, and then I was falling in, and my back hit solid wood. I sobbed with relief once, and then I sucked in a deep lungful of air and held it, not daring to make a noise. The girl was pounding on the doors, howling her fury, and then she turned and ran back up the aisle, past the coffin to the pulpit, to the altar, searching for me. I stared at the arched ceiling of the church and listened to her screams, to her calling for me, demanding to know where the sentry was, threatening to flood this city, this world, with death and disease for the promise that had been broken. There was a pressure against my chest, on my legs, weighing me down. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and I recognized the feeling. Like dirt. Like I was being covered with dirt. It took every ounce of my will to not leap from the coffin. I kept my eyes wide open, staring up, reminding myself that this wasn't real, that it was an open coffin in a church, and that I was not being buried alive. But still, the pressure mounted and my breathing grew labored as my limbs grew leaden. The night wore on, and her cries softened. I heard desperation in her voice, and it was only one voice now, sometimes calling for a sentry and sometimes calling for her father. Close to dawn, it broke entirely, and she wept openly. She cried for her mother. She cursed her father and screamed with grief, angry that he had killed her, and yet so desperate to see him, the last bit of family that she had left. By now, I could not move my body. The sensation of dirt continued to fall upon me, pushing me down further and further towards the base of the coffin, and my sides ached simply from the torturous act of trying to move my chest up and down. I wanted nothing more than to rip myself from the grave, to break the hold over me before it was too late and the pressure took away all ability to breathe. And her weeping, I wanted to go to her, to tell her that it was okay, that he was waiting and that we'd go together to see him. Anything to ease her suffering. I repeated Christian's instructions in my head instead, over and over. Stay in the coffin until dawn. Stay until dawn. I remember a pressure over my nose and mouth, cold, suffocating. Panic filled my mind as I held stale air inside my lungs and fought the primal, instinctive urge to fight my way out of the coffin and into the clean air beyond. Some distant part of my brain registered that the church had gone quiet, and back of my neck pricked as something moved in the corner of my vision. Slowly, reluctantly, with stale oxygen burning in my lungs, I slipped my gaze off of the ceiling and to the side of the coffin where thin, white fingers with long, sharp nails had just curled over the top of the wood.
Ah, yes. Our favorite time of the show. Sponsor time. I'm gonna let Hush Puppy take it from here and tell you about his channel. But you have to promise me, no visiting his channel until you've at least finished this video first. I mean, how rude is it to just leave in the middle of a video? Seriously, promise me. Do it now. No, not later, not I'll do what I can. I need to know that you won't leave me. Okay, well, I guess here's Hush Puppy.
Salutations, good people. I'm the Scottish Hush Puppy, and salutations to all you good people over there at Spookyou, all the subscribers, listeners, and even you, Barnabas. And before I tell you who I am, I want to give a sincere thank you to everybody at the channel for allowing me to be your sponsor for the Frightening Nights of Halloween series that's going to be taking place on October the 18th. So make sure you're subscribed. Do not miss that, because if you're anything like me, you love a good spooky story, and what better place than the YouTube channel you're watching right now. Now, what is a Scottish Hush Puppy, and what does it do? Well, over at our channel, we do a lot of live streams. We stream a lot of horror games, especially through the month of October, and we stream a variety of games when it's not October. And we love to have people watch us live, and we want to provide a family-friendly environment for anybody, absolutely anybody, to come in, hang out, and make it feel more like a casual hangout than a live stream. Because usually everybody in the chat, they're all friends, and we can't wait to see you in one of our live streams in the upcoming foreseeable future. So, that being said, I just might be narrating one of these Frightening Nights stories. And of course, all this is leading up to the big live stream on Halloween itself. And I might be popping up there as well. So don't miss it. Hit subscribe on that Spookyou button. Annihilate it. And until next time, I've been the Scottish Hush Puppy, and I got some food to go eat.
Oh, good. You're still here. You are still here, aren't you? It's kind of hard to see through the glare on your screen. Turn your brightness down. No, a little bit. No, just please. Forget it. I'm sure you're still hanging on. Let's get back to the story.
The girl stared down at me, silent and still, the spines of her hair framing her face like a halo. She had finally found me. And then, the light of dawn flooded the church. The sensation of pressure on my body vanished, and the girl slumped like all her strings were cut, and then she vanished from my line of sight. I inhaled sharply, gasping and coughing, and when I was quiet again, I found that the church, too, had gone silent. The girl's weeping had ceased, and there were the distant voices of someone walking by on the sidewalk outside, but that was all. Tentatively, I crawled from the coffin, and the girl lay directly next to the coffin. She was pale, her skin luminescent, and her hair spread about her in a fine haze. I hovered under her uncertainly, realizing that she was alive, that she was breathing. She stirred, eyes opening, staring up and about her in wild surprise. I told her that I was the sentry that her father had set, that I'd stayed the 3 nights and that I could take her to him now, if she wanted to go to him, of course. I'd heard her say that he'd killed her. I messaged her father on my phone, and he gave me his address once I said his daughter was alive and I'd bring her to him. She sat in the passenger seat of my car and stared out the window, not speaking, and, well, I really didn't know what to say to her to spark some sort of conversation. So, crazy last 3 days, huh? What was up with your hair? The father met us at the door. No, it wasn't Christian, as some of you have speculated. He quickly ushered us inside to where he'd made tea and had biscuits and jam waiting. The girl seemed unnerved. She acted awkwardly towards her father, not able to look at him, and finally busied herself with the food. I edged away, and the father followed me until we were in the hallway, well out of earshot. He pulled out his wallet and started counting out the rest of my payment, but I didn't take it right away. "You have some explaining to do," I said in a low voice. My tone was meant to keep the girl from hearing, but it came out as menacing instead. He flinched. "Her mother had made a bargain," he said, "with something. It gave her a child, but there were certain terms that had to be met. The girl wasn't to see or speak to her father until her 18th birthday. And then her mother died," I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. He nodded miserably. He had immigrated, thinking that if an ocean separated them, it would be safer, easier, and they'd reunite after her birthday. Then there was the car accident, and the relatives, not knowing of the bargain, had sent her to America. I thought it wouldn't matter," he sobbed softly. "Her birthday was only a few days away. Besides, what choice did I have? I couldn't leave her alone in a new country, and I guess I thought now that my wife was dead, the entity would consider our bargain concluded. I glanced into the other room where the girl was shoving her third biscuit into her mouth. No wonder her interactions with her father seemed so stilted. She'd literally never met the man until the moment he showed up at the airport and doomed her to die. There was a way out, her father continued. She told him before she died. She, despite never being told of the bargain, somehow knew what fate awaited her. Weeping, she told him what he must do. Set a sentry that would watch over the coffin. If the sentry failed or fled, then disease and death would cover the city and continue to spread the longer her coffin went unattended. If a year had passed by and still no sentry had succeeded in their task, then she would be lost to him forever. I didn't know what to say. Should I be angry? He'd risked the lives of others, gotten people killed. I wondered, maybe if I knew the reason and the cost, would I have still stood watch? I still think on this, and I think of all the things the girl said on that second night, of how I was selfish, how I would abandon others when they no longer pleased me, and how someday that selfishness would consume me and I would hurt others to serve my own ends. And I feared that maybe she was right, and if there hadn't been the promise of money that, well, maybe I wouldn't have risked my life. I took the money from him and left without saying anything more. They could sort out their relationship on their own. Besides, I had to get myself to the hospital. I went to the ER. The triage nurses didn't seem excited as I described my symptoms, even when I mentioned the bulbous that had erupted on my legs overnight. Then I sat and had to wait for a bit and wound up vomiting blood onto the floor, and, well, things moved a little bit quicker after that. They got me into a room and the doctor took a look at my legs, and then I was being whisked away into a room with a bag of IV antibiotics. Christian didn't take long to appear. "This is not the first in the morning," he hissed at me. "Treatment needed to be started within 24 hours of the first symptoms. You could die from this." I told him I paid the father a visit. I relayed everything he'd told me about the bargain and how we'd saved the girl and the city as well. Christian stared pensively out the window while I talked, and he fumbled in his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. He stared at them sourly for a long moment, and then, with a long sigh, he threw them into a nearby trash can. I guess I should stop smoking again," he said dejectedly. "Lung cancer is suddenly back on the table." And he shoved his hands in his pockets and walked out, presumably to report yet another case of plague in what was hopefully an abated epidemic. I'm still at the hospital. The doctors are grim when they talk to me, but they've offered up some hope that I'll pull through now that they've got me hooked up to antibiotics. I feel wretched. I'm going to finish up this post and then pass out and sleep for as long as they'll let me. It's been a rough couple of days here. Keep an eye on the news. If you hear about a bubonic plague outbreak in the next few days, you'll know that we didn't succeed and that this isn't over. But I think it'll be okay. I think this all turned out okay. I saved a girl and a bunch of others and got paid $1,700 in the process. But I think I'm going to stick to just gardening jobs in the future, though.
Oh, great. Another outro. Look, I appreciate you sticking around, but that does mean that tonight is over and we're inching closer and closer to the end of October. And while I love Halloween and all things spooky, I'm not adept at coping with change. Or goodbyes. Or even see you laters. I mean, we're nearing the end of spooky season, for crying out loud. Hey, quit your snickering. Even monsters have feelings, you know. Besides, here at Spookyou, our spookiness knows no bounds. We're going to be bringing you terrifying tales all year round. And we don't really believe in the concept of too much of a good thing. I mean, that's preposterous. If that were the case, they would have fired me a long time ago. Anyways, if you've been with us through the entirety of our Frightening Night series thus far and you haven't subscribed, well, what are you waiting for? With our luck, you'll croak before you smash that button, and then we'll have to cut into our budget just to reanimate you to do this one simple task. Well, and then it's remedial tasks from there on out. I mean, if we're forking out the cash, you're at least doing the dishes. Oh, and hit that like button too. It helps make us look good to the YouTube deities and pushes our content out into the World Wide Web. That way newcomers and longtimers alike can discover our content. Or something like that. Hey, I'm just a monster reading a script voiced by some guy behind a mic. What do I know? Well, we'll see you tomorrow night for another episode of our Frightening Nights of Halloween. Until then, my ghastly gang, stay spooky.